Hello everyone. I've been a competitive Pokemon tutor for a few years now, and I've noticed that players at certain levels tend to gravitate towards certain problems. The majority of my clients have been what I'd classify as mid-level players, and the problem I'll discuss today is the most common issue I see when I tutor someone. Also, in this video, I'll be using examples from Smogon's Scarlet and Violet OU tier, but the principles I'll discuss apply to all singles and doubles formats. Before we get into the biggest problem for mid-level players though, for context, let's briefly go over the most common issues I see at a low level. The number one problem for very new or inexperienced players is just lack of knowledge. They don't know what Pokemon do, they don't know what abilities do, and in some cases they even have a shaky grasp on the type chart. For example, here are some conversation snippets I've had in tutoring sessions. Why did you leave your Raging Bolt in against that Great Tusk? I thought Raging Bolt was faster. Oh. Why did you click Sludge Bomb on Garganacl? I was trying to poison it. It can't be poisoned, its ability Purifying Salt prevents status. Oh. There's no guide video that can help you with knowledge problems. You just need to play a ton of games and slowly learn. The next problem players encounter, once they have enough knowledge to make somewhat reasonable decisions, is what I call prediction playing. Some players never have this issue, but most do. Making decisions is complicated, and many low-level players conclude that the solution is to predict your opponent every turn. You just ask yourself, what do you think your opponent will do? And then you make the play that punishes that choice hardest. Of course, people are unpredictable and often make decisions you didn't expect, so this strategy is quite poor. There are, of course, turns where you should try to predict your opponent, or even turns where you have to predict your opponent, but most turns a better way to play is called middle ground playing. This is where you assess many of your opponent's likely options and make a decision based on evaluating risk and reward. That's not the point of this video, but if you want a very detailed breakdown of middle ground plays, a guide to that will be linked in the description. So those are the two main mistakes low-level players make, but what about mid-level players? Mid-level players have game knowledge down, they know what abilities do, they have their speed tiers memorized, they know the common sets in the tier, and so on. They also know not to try and predict their opponent every turn. They've realized that by covering many options with their plays and focusing on positioning rather than prediction, they can win more games. They play many games using these strategies, and they start to build more knowledge. Not just the basic knowledge of the game, like types, abilities, and moves, but knowledge of common battling interactions. They learn to click U-turn with their Landorus when facing a Galarian Slowking, because almost nobody will stay in. They learn to switch their Moltres against a Kingambit, since they can fish for a Flame Body burn. They learn to bait a Kingambit into clicking Sucker Punch, and then switch into their Ogerpon Wellspring and click Encore. They learn how to play well in thousands of scenarios like this. Humans are designed to recognize patterns, and so mid-level players will learn what is usually the right play in a familiar situation. The key word here is usually. What if your opponent has no ground resists left on their team? Then Landorus shouldn't U-turn on the Glowking. They might very well sack the Glowking if there isn't a good switch-in. What if Moltres' health is very important for dealing with the Dragonite, so you shouldn't go into Moltres at all against Kingambit, but rather use another Kingambit counter on your team, like Corviknight or Great Tusk? What if Kingambit was the last Pokemon on your opponent's team, and instead of switching into Ogerpon Wellspring on the Sucker Punch, you could simply sack a Pokemon to Sucker Punch and then Encore, instead of needlessly risking the game? Many mid-level players will become familiar with these interactions and make the same play every time, regardless of the game state. I've seen countless tutoring clients make senseless, terrible decisions simply because that play was correct in many games they'd played in the past when faced with a similar situation. It's not bad to have a sense of what is typically the right play in a given scenario. For example, I'd wholeheartedly agree that Moltres is a great Kingambit switch-in and often should be switched into Kingambit. The problem is when you make that play all the time instead of most of the time. Every game of Pokemon is unique, even if situations seem similar. If you make decisions based on what you often do in similar situations, you're going to make a lot of non-optimal plays. So many mid-level players have built up so much knowledge of these interactions, they make the typical play almost 100% of the time. I call this problem habit playing. Habit playing is dangerous for several reasons. First, habit playing won't cause you to make terrible plays. If you try to predict your opponent every turn, like a low-level player, you will sometimes get punished very hard for it. Habit playing, though, because you're making a play that is generally good in that situation, will hardly ever get you punished in a significant or noticeable way. Habit plays aren't bad plays. In fact, they're often the optimal play. But if you can't identify the times when they're not the optimal play, you'll be a much worse player. Pokemon games at a top level are often lost due to just one non-optimal play. The second reason habit playing is so dangerous is that people often mistake it for intuition. They think it's good that they're playing faster. They think they're getting a sense for the game. Some might call it a gut feeling that they think is steering them in the right direction. The third reason habit playing is so dangerous is that it actually does help you at first. As I said earlier, making the decision that is usually the right play is almost never going to be a bad play. It will just often be a non-optimal play. Recognizing common battle interactions and memorizing responses will probably gain you elo and get you wins for some time. Especially for players that struggle with the timer, this fast decision making will probably lead to you winning a lot more, at least at first. This early success with habit playing will lull you into complacency, and you'll learn to trust that gut feeling that in reality is just thoughtless memorization that's holding you back from playing better. Memorizing common interactions should guide your plays, but not decide them. Habit playing is without a doubt the number one problem mid-level players have, and it's the number one reason I see people stagnate and stop improving at competitive Pokemon. Do you ever notice yourself making plays without thinking and very quickly selecting options? Do you ever find yourself in a bad position in a game, completely shocked to find yourself there, and you realize that you never even considered you could end up in this scenario? Do you ever watch a replay of one of your games and notice there was a really great play that you somehow missed? If any of these sound familiar, it's very likely that you habit play. Let's take a look at an example of habit playing in a game. I'm poised to win this game with my Kingambit, but I get a bit greedy and go for a Kowtow Cleave expecting a switch, and Zamazenta surprises me with Terra Dark. This was a huge mistake on my part. Suddenly, it's anyone's game. My Glowking is at very low health, and my opponent has a very healthy Zapdos and Gholdengo, both of which are very threatening to me. I go into Glowking, and expecting Zapdos to switch, I go for a Chilly Reception. Unfortunately, I was wrong, and I get hit with a Thunder Wave. I bring in Landorus to discourage a Volt Switch, and then go right back into Glowking. Hurricane, unfortunately, comes out and gets a critical hit, but when I Chilly Reception again, Zapdos switches as I'd hoped, likely fearing a Toxic, and I get my Cinderace in on the Gholdengo. My opponent here makes a questionable choice, sacking Gholdengo, but it does position their Primarina very, very well. Due to my Glowking's poor health, Primarina can just click Surf here and guarantee a kill, putting me in a very scary situation. I need to let something die. I decide that Landorus is my best sack, as it is my least valuable Pokemon. So, I click U-turn, go into Landorus, ready to take a Surf, and then they click Flip Turn, denying themselves a kill and taking significant Rocky Helmet chip. Why would they do this? Surf was, in every way, a better play. My guess is that they were habit playing. It was a stressful endgame, and they defaulted to familiar playing. Generally, when your opponent has a Glowking, you should click Flip Turn. Surf will only get you Chilly Receptioned on, and you won't do nearly enough damage to kill Glowking. all surf damage will just be regenerated. Unless, of course, the Glow King is very weak, like mine was here, and there is no switch in to surf. Although I can't get inside my opponent's mind and say for sure, I expect my opponent was so used to clicking flip turn on Glow King that they totally missed a far superior play. With this one non-optimal play, my opponent turned this from a tight endgame into an almost certain win for me. Realizing their hopeless situation, after a few moments of consideration, my opponent forfeits. That was an extreme instance of habit playing. I picked an obvious case for the sake of a clear example, but habit playing is often much more subtle. It can be as simple as switching in Landorus and using Stealth Rock at a point in the game where it would be more impactful to simply deal damage with Earthquake. The point is that when you don't look at the state of the current game, but rather rely on a sense of intuition developed over many past games, you make a lot of non-optimal plays. Now, like many problems, habit playing is a spectrum. Some people only habit play when the timer is low, when they're nervous, or when the game state is particularly complicated. Some people only habit play when they're tired, or angry, or impatient. On the other hand, others habit play nearly every single turn, and often go entire games without a single thought in their head, beyond recalling memorized interactions. Most players are somewhere in the middle. We're all somewhere on this spectrum, and everybody habit plays sometimes. But if you think this is a significant problem in your playing, and there's a very good chance it is, listen as I explain how to conquer habit playing. The first and most important step, much like solving many other problems, is acknowledging that you have a problem. Being aware that you habit play is more than half the battle. Just by watching this video, you've already made great progress in correcting your habit playing. The next important step is to force yourself to think through turns. Even when a play seems obvious, consider other possible options. If you're a habit player, you probably don't have a problem running down the timer, so I know you have time to think. If you find yourself missing optimal plays even when you make an active effort to consider your options, you can actually just force yourself to consider every possible option. At any point, you only have 10 buttons maximum, 4 moves, 5 switches, and Terra. And most of these options can be very quickly disregarded. As daunting as thinking through every possible play sounds, it really doesn't take that much time, especially when you get more practice with active thinking and analysis during games. Now you're equipped with the tools you need to overcome habit playing. As long as you stay vigilant and force yourself to think, you're on the path to becoming a much stronger player. If you got something out of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Now, before I end the video, I do want to acknowledge that there is one scenario in which it is a good idea to habit play, and that is when your timer is at like 4 seconds. If you don't have time to think, let your intuition guide you, since it will probably make a decent play, even if it's not the optimal play. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned something, and I'll see you next time.